This presentation will be looking at how children can learn through writing in science. It will explore different areas of literacy, writing, and the ways in which literacy informs these areas of science. Historically, cross-curricular approach work has been associated with more child-centered constructive approaches to primary education, which in the last century was endorsed by the Hadlow Report of 1931, the Plowden Report of 1967, and a number of school council reports in the 1970s. Arguments in support of this approach are based on the understanding of child development. Very young children at preschool and lower into primary school do not assign particular activities to particular subjects, and therefore this approach more closely mirrors the way they learn. The 1960s, 70s, and 80s saw a move towards organising national curriculum around cross-curricular topics or projects. However, after the introduction of the national curriculum in 1988, there was a move away from cross-curricular subjects to more discrete teaching. This disappeared when the National Primary Strategy and QCA schemes of work were introduced. However, more recently, Rose advocates teaching both discrete and cross-curricular subjects at school. The National Curriculum 2014. If we're in science, from 2014 onwards, the main focus in Key Stage 1 will be to communicate ideas effectively. However, in Key Stage 1 and 2, children should be able to read, spell, scientific vocabulary correctly. In Key Stage 2, there is more emphasis on writing in science, so children are required to report and present findings in written form, record their findings, display findings in the form of a presentation, draw conclusions, make predictions, stylistic conventions. Writing in science uses unfamiliar writing styles that are non-familiar to children. Children are used to writing in narrative form. As Lemmy argues, the language of science uses forms of writing which are unfamiliar to children. It uses technical terms such as energy, force, and power which are used in unfamiliar contexts which can confuse children to how and when they use them. It avoids the use of personification, metaphoric and figurative language that children are used to use in literacy. By doing so, it restricts children to answering why, what, and how. These features make it similar to learning a foreign language and require children to learn about the grammatical and semantic meaning associated with its forms of expression. Language in science is a multi-semantic mode of communication and does not use words alone to communicate meaning. Science uses graphs, charts, diagrams and symbols and pictures to communicate ideas. Language of science is a technical language and sets up barriers to comprehension, and therefore, if children cannot comprehend and understand the basics of science, then they cannot write for learning in science. Supporting pupils. Martin and Miller argue that the main genres of science are the report, which has four main forms: reports that clarify, reports that decompose, reports that describe, and reports that list properties. Secondly, explanations. Thirdly, experimental accounts, both instrumental and recounts. Exposition, which presents arguments in favour of the position. Reports. Reports in science are difficult for children to understand. This is because they are in written forms that are in present tense. which is unfamiliar to them as they are used to writing things about what happened in the past, for example historical accounts of what they did in the school holidays. Therefore, asking children to write about parts of the heart, for example, will be difficult. One way of structuring children's writing is to use a writing frame in order to organize children's writing. The frame guides the writer to the key features of the genre and is a planned tool used to organize the writing. Using a frame can help to develop children's ideas which can then be discussed with the rest of the class. It is important for children to see a good example of a completed writing frame so that they can develop their own. This will give important insight into the process of non-fiction accounts. The role of narrative in science. Our lives are told and represented through narratives. Stories are used to make a way of making sense of and communicating events in the world. Stories are a vehicle through which events and experiences are communicated among people. Therefore, Goff argues that science fiction text should be an integral part of science and that narrative strategies of fiction may be more appropriate for representing science than, textual practices that have mainly dominated science today. Genres and audiences. Scientific discourse has its own historic genre, even though we may not recognise them in such a way, rather than fitting into a particular category of literacy or literary way. Scientific discourse has its own particular model and style of writing. It is intended to accomplish a particular persuasive purpose. Each is intended to reach a particular audience for a particular purpose, and therefore constrained in its use of rhetorical strategies. Montgomery situates current scientific writings with a vast evolving cosmos, noting many different types of papers now exist in the world of scientific publishing. For example, a research article, an actual report, of an actual report, letters, communications, brief research papers, usually less than 5 or 6 pages, commentary or forum, a brief debate, discussion, letters to an editor, technical responses to early published materials. Such letters usually serve a purpose for debate and criticism. Book reviews, which are useful in schools. Editorial accounts, opinion pieces on topics that might range from recent discoveries or ethical concerns. And proposal. A proposal is several things. A request for example, a request for interest or funding for an argument for the significance of certain ideas. All of these different genres can be used in schools to support writing in science and can be used by children to develop their own scientific knowledge and literacy skills. The use of ICT in the classroom can be very beneficial across all subjects. However, it can be particularly useful when it comes to writing for learning in science. Tennessee, 2005, found that there was a gradual process of a pedagogical revolution apparent when teachers were developing and trialing new strategies specifically for mediating ICT-supported learning. In particular, these overcame potentially obstructive role of some forms of ICT while focusing the pupil's attention on the underlying learning objectives. Tennessee did point out the reluctance to use ICT was more evident in English and science, perhaps because teachers in these subjects lacked the support and the collective experience which the fuller integrator to which the following generic RCT means. Osborne and Henderson conducted a literature review and found that RCT can be used to support writing in poems, as it can be used to model, um, to show models of written text on the whiteboard, for example. Finally, conclude, the literature suggests that writing for learning in science can take on many different forms. Supporting children's writing in science is important, and using a writing frame can help them. Using narrative forms can help children make sense of their writing and therefore have a deep understanding of what they are writing about. The use of ICT can enhance learning across all subjects, and especially when it comes to literacy and science.